exactly 8:30, and today is Thursday, August the 8th, and welcome to week number 6 of J280, Contemporary Issues in Criminal Justice. I'm Professor Richard Wright, and I'm going to cover the details of the assignment for this week, and recognizing the fact that we have our next lecture is week 8, and then we have one more week 10. So I am going to comment about the assignment for week 7, which people will want to understand. So I'm going to provide information concerning that as well. So let's go ahead and start by sharing my screen. And we scroll down. And you can see that the live lecture for week number 6 is taking place today. So we had, I said week number 2 lecture here, but actually it was week number 3 lecture. So there was no week number 2 lecture. So let me adjust that and fix that. Week number 3. There we go. And so now you look at it, it says week number 3. So today's lecture is week number 6, and then the next one is week number 8. So let's start out by going right to the week 6 announcement. Interviewing within criminal justice fields, and in Module 6. And your assignments for this week are the discussion assignment, answering interview questions, which many of you have already started that, and you know that the initial post was due on Tuesday, and that the reply post is due on Saturday. Finally, your written assignment for Sunday, which is due, is interviewing in criminal justice, and that's due Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then let's take a look at the calendar, course calendar, and you can see where we are here. Right there it is. So this is where we are, the lecture for week 6 lecture. And then you'll see that the next one is not until the 22nd. If you go back, you could see that the one before that was week 3, because we started with the very first open house, which was on a Friday the 5th, and then week 3, the 18th. And so now here we are right here at this point. Okay. So your reply post is due on Saturday, and then your written assignment, as well as your key phrase, is due by the 11th, which is Sunday. Okay, and then next week, I'll talk about the assignments in just a few minutes here, because our next lecture will be 2 weeks from today. So let's go right into the module itself. Now again, let's look at the assignments in more detail. You're going to write a 1 to 2 page paper and write 8 potential justice studies questions, and you're rather elaborate. When it says elaborate, that means they're not short responses for each question. Be sure to include why you believe each answer is appropriate. Now, and they should be geared toward a dream job. Now, make sure that you provide citations in the body and references at the end, because you should provide some research in terms of providing, coming up with these questions and getting an idea about what questions you want to ask. So here is the module itself. Here's the rubric for 30 possible points, and it tells you, identify a position in the field of interest and explains 8 possible interview questions and appropriate responses. Remember, they need to be elaborate for the criminal justice field that you do this on. And then this is the structure, should be in paragraphs. 1 to 2 pages minimum length, and there should be APA citations in the body and references at the end. And it says all sources properly cited as in-text citation in the body of the paper. Very, very, very important. A lot of people, and then make sure it's double-spaced as well. So then let's go back, and then you're going to see the other assignment is your discussion post. And then your live keyword that it will be due. It is due this Sunday, August the 11th. And so I'll give that to you at some point during this session. Actually, I mention it usually a whole lot during it, but I will reveal to you at some point what you need to provide to get your points. So now let's go back. Now that we've seen the assignments, let's now go to the point where we talk about the lesson content. So basically, you're going to see what the assignments are, and there they are right there. And so now I'm going to spend time talking to you about the objectives, that is dealing with hiring, and the importance of interview questions as well. So one of the things that you should be aware of is that, and I know you're aware of it, is that you're in school not because you just want to get an education, but you're in school to get an education so that you can get a good opportunity for a job. And you're in criminal justice because that's the field that you want to work in. And so in terms of considering what you need to do for this week we're preparing you to begin to get in your mind some questions that you might possibly consider for interview questions. Now, what you have to do, to be honest with you, is sit down. And first of all, number one, in order to prepare interview questions, you need to know something about the organization or a field that you're interviewing in. You need to have done some research first. That research prepares you for knowledge about what the field really is and how the field operates. At the same time, then you begin to think in terms of, if you were interviewing someone for a position or a job, what would you ask them? What would you consider as important that those people should be able to have answers to during an interview? Because as a candidate, the person who is the employer who is interviewing you for a prospective position is going to be looking at to see what you know and your knowledge of their organization and the field itself. And so it is interesting that you understand, in dealing with criminal justice, these come about by a number of things. Think about it in terms of your studies in school. Think about it in terms of your projects, like the field report, and think of it in terms of like the report that some of you did who were involved in Introduction to Corrections that I teach now and have taught for several quarters, the course project, where you interview someone for your paper. The whole idea of these interviews is to gather information and knowledge that will let you know how the field operates. And you're going to have probably almost everybody coming in with some of the same questions that, so, you know, dealing with the integrity of you, dealing with how you would handle tough situations, dealing with your skills, dealing with your weaknesses, and how do you use your skills and benefits to decrease your weaknesses so that you're prepared to do a job professionally. And so employers, when they come in, they want people that demonstrate knowledge, and they'll pay very closely to your questions. I mean, your questions you ask them, as well as how you answer the questions that they ask. You should be aware of the fact that one of the most important things now that employers, especially in criminal justice, will engage in is how would you respond to a situation that might put you in an ethical dilemma. And what would be your response? How would you respond? And they're going to be testing one of those critical skills that we talk about, transferable skills that we have in our syllabus and that we talked about at Open House in week 1. And that is, how ethical are you? Are you familiar with the professional responsibilities of the field or industry that you're planning on going in? Then those things are public documents, public sources. They can be found on the internet. And so employers are going to be looking to see how you are in that area of ethics. It is so important for employers to understand they are hiring people that will follow the rules and procedures, even when under pressure, even when tempted to try to do something different, as well as recognizing the fact that there are certain standards that employers want to maintain when they're hiring prospective individuals for positions and jobs. And so they're going to be looking at to see exactly how you might handle a particular scenario. They might throw out a scenario at you. Now, I always tell people that knowing what the job is and what the job description carries, and maybe even talking to other people that you know who have worked in the field, it's not unfair to ask them what are some of the things that a prospective employer might ask if you're going, for example, into law enforcement, probation, or parole, or you're going into maybe even being a lawyer, defense or prosecutor, if you're going to go work in forensics. There are certain questions that those individuals could tell you that help them to get their jobs. Now, with it's being said that ethics is so very, very, very important in criminal justice, you need to sit down and think about that in itself. Now, I haven't been a lawyer. I've interviewed with various organizations, law firms, and groups. And these questions that they asked me related to the practice of law. If you're going to go in law enforcement, you're probably going to be asked questions that relate to what police officers have to engage in, and again, the different scenarios given to you. When I came to Rasmussen College, and I was employed as an adjunct professor, I sat down and I thought about the questions that the employer would ask me at Rasmussen College, and I did that through the fact of researching and checking the website, learning about the particular school, and then about the areas that I wanted to work in. Well, at that particular time, I was applying for a position to teach business law. But some years later, after I had been an adjunct professor placed in the criminal justice program, I had an opportunity to apply for what we call the state program coordinator position of the School of Justice Studies for the state of Illinois for Rasmussen. And I did research about what other program coordinators were doing and how they operated. And so I was prepared and had written out questions. I think I had about 50 questions that I wrote out, every possible thing I could think of. And then I sat down and I had some help for people to ask me these questions, and I provided answers to those questions. I had written them down, but I also had to digest that information so that when I'm able to present the information, I'm not reading from a prepared script or anything like that. And so in preparing these questions, I can tell you that every question that was on my sheet, there was nothing on my sheet that I was not prepared for, because I thoroughly looked at the position that I was applying for and learned about what was expected. Now, in addition to that, I prepared my own manifesto, my own ideas that I could bring to the table. You're going to need to be prepared when it comes to interview questions to answer things in such a way that you stand out in the crowd. One of the questions that I was asked at the end of my interview for the School of Justice Studies position was, what makes me more qualified than anyone else for the position? And I did not hesitate to share with the person who was doing the interview, and by the way, it was a phone interview on this occasion. I did have some face-to-face interviews after, well, before, actually after that. And so in those interviews, the one thing that I was able to answer consistently with each person who asked me that very same question, what I had gone through, prepare myself being a criminal justice professional and to be a leader in criminal justice. And I shared my personal experiences. I shared what I learned from working in the field myself as a student, like in internships that were not paid, but they were opportunities for me to get into the various agencies and learn how they operated. And so my interview question that made me stand above the crowd was that I was confident in what I was saying about myself. Now, I saw some of you say in some of your interview questions that you had to be careful about being cocky and arrogant. That's true. But what you do want to be able to do is uh, present yourself as an individual who can respond quickly to situations and circumstances, because that's going to be par for the course when you begin to work in those various professions in criminal justice. You also are going to need to be thinking about questions that put you outside the norm, but not violate the policies and ethics of whatever area that you work in, where you can bring something unique to the position or to the job. And you got to say, how am I a unique individual? Because remember, when you're positions, you're going to have many people applying for the same position. And maybe there may be only one position available. Like in the state program coordinator, I don't know how many people vied for it. I just know what I presented, and I put my best foot forward. And as I like to say, I emptied out everything that was inside me that was relevant to performing the job as the state program coordinator, based upon my research, based upon my discussions with other coordinators, and getting a clear understanding about what I needed to do to enhance the position. Remember one thing: most employers don't want cookie cutter people. They want people who can think outside the box, who are not afraid to make decisions, who don't run away from challenges, but at the same time are going to present responses that are positive and instead of negative. So in preparing your justice studies interview questions, you have to take and consider the things I just presented to you, so that you'll understand clearly how important it is for you to be able to land a good position, and also so that you can be able to climb up the ranks. Do you not know that there are employers that I'm aware of who will tell you that what caused them to really pull you out of the crowd was your uniqueness? And you have to be unique in terms of the answer. Sometimes people give standard answers. Like, for example, why do you want to become a police officer? Well, I want to serve and protect, but I also have family members, and we've had a long line of police officers in our family. Well, you're going to hear almost everybody say that. But when you tie that to and make it more of who you are in terms of providing the answer, that is going to be something that a prospective employer is going to maybe highlight and make notes about those kinds of things. So I asked a question in the interview that I was in, is that if I'm selected as the person for this role, will you value my opinion in terms of the team? And the employer appreciated that question. He said that was a good question because of the fact that that let him know that I felt that I would contribute something positive, something good, or something that no other person could contribute. And that made him realize that I was thinking beyond the typical interview questions. Now, be very careful, people, And don't, like I said again, don't undersell yourself either. And as I said before, you know, competition is pretty steep for employment in our day and time, and so you possibly will want to do that. So then we talk about preparing interview questions and possible answers. Sit down, write those questions out, and what the possible answers should be to those questions. And in most instances, they're short and to the point. They're not very wordy in terms of your answers, and they're not answers that are get you off into areas that don't apply to the question that's asked. In other words, stay on task in terms of the answers that you possibly will give, because that person who's interviewing you is interested in getting a good person, or as is oftentimes presented, the best person for the position. And so you want to find yourself that. When you do your research on a particular area, learning about, you know, what exactly is done, what the training is, what your desire may be in the future, it is to become a detective if you are a police officer, a uniformed police officer. And those kind of things that employers begin to realize that you're moving forward and you're going to do things that will launch you closer to becoming that detective. That's a good thing, and people should always remember it. So I pretty much discussed interviewing in criminal justice, and I gave you some unique issues, like I said, that relate to the ethics as a big ticket now, and some common interview questions. I've given you a few of those type of things as well. And then to prepare interview questions, make sure again that you always provide an answer. What answer would you want to hear if you were hiring someone? In other words, think about you're the employer, even though you're the employee, or you're the interviewee, of course, but you want to think in terms of if you were the interviewer, and that's what you want to provide in terms of that. And I think that if you follow the things that we talked about and in conducting your research, some of you had some very good questions. You should fare very well. You should fare very well. But confidence in yourself, getting the job done, is very, very, very critical. Being able to think outside the box so that you stand above the crowd, so that your name is remembered. Your face and how you approach things is remembered as well. So that's what I wanted to share with you concerning this. Now, the key phrase that I want to give you is, I've said it over and over and over and over, is criminal justice interview. That's it. You give me that, you can get your points. So before I adjourn tonight, I want to take a few minutes and go over, look at Module 7, so that you can understand clearly, especially there's one particular assignment that students always ask me about, and this is it right here. It tells you to develop a short 2 to 3 minute original video. Now, and then in a one page, summarize the contents of the video. And so provide your explanation which demonstrates good and poor communication. Now, I inevitably will have someone to reach out to me and say, Professor, I can't really do the video, or the video's not uploading. It's too long. I'm having trouble doing it. It happens every time. But I say, look at the second paragraph. If you are unable to create your own video, notify your faculty member as soon as possible. I'm telling you, you don't have to notify me, because I'm giving you the ability to be able to follow the next statement. You can use as an alternate video source a link to an online video that demonstrates good communication. But make sure you give credit for that where you got it, citations in the body and references at the end. Very important. So there it is for that assignment. And then when you go and look at the rubric, which is very important, again, you'll see that laid out as well. And it tells you share an original video, but an alternative to the video is to share an online link. It demonstrates good versus poor. And so I'm giving you in your rubric the answer to your question that you don't need to ask me is, what do you do if you can't provide your own video? And that assignment, again, citations and references there. All right. I think that's the only one I need to really cover. Yeah, because you just have your discussion posts that are due for that as well. And so with that, I'm going to say a good night to you, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Get those assignments in. I hope that you guys are getting those field reports, because they're going to be due coming up soon, the final one, and that some of you have had challenges, but I've shared with you what you need to do to deal with those challenges. So with that, I'm going to adjourn this session, go back to the classroom, and I'm going to say good night to you and see you in 2 weeks. Again, you know what to do if you need to reach out to me. So good night.